All right, you guys are in for a doozy. This is a long one, ASMR. Okay, so in the 3 videos before this, I talked about how the importance of a narrative in a fighting game in terms of being able to teach the audience and potential player about what the game is about. Super Turbo had 2 drastically different playstyles in Sagat and Balrog that were in the competitive narrative. They are easily digestible. They are both the good guy and the bad guy. As these 2 characters are played regularly, the audience can get a feel for what they are going to get into if they choose to play this game. They are super turbo in a sense and show off the game well and are a good crash course for what's about to come while still being easily digestible and understandable. And they also showed off an interesting story of where fighting games were going at the time and the 2 ideologies of what fighting games could or should be at play. Soul with the Dust Loop, he showed how you can take a series that was only doing well enough to survive but had no easily digestible narrative. Teaching someone what a FDC Infinite with Jam or a Mistrap with Johnny beforehand is perhaps hard to appreciate for a casual potential audience. But with Soul you had that perfect storm. A simple fundamental idea in Street Fighter now also had a drastic influence on the match in Guilty Gear. And although, again, it was a simple idea, to do this simple idea required you to learn Guilty Gear at the exact same time. He was a great teacher for the narrative of Guilty Gear XX, right? And then we had a game like Karna's Revenge, a game that although is deceptively unique, the uniqueness of the game was obscure and not common or obvious enough to outshine the perhaps dull narrative of the game. And you were left with a game that, because of it, it was just considered a Street Fighter clone with balloon, right? So for this video, I want to talk about the narrative of emotion in a fighting game, right? And what a game makes you feel as a player and why it is important, while also showing off the problem of the constant oversimplification of games and how it ruins fighting games, right? So roll with me here, okay? Roll with me here for a little bit. But before we get directly into fighting games and how emotion is important, let's take a look at a genre like RPGs, for example, as a comparison. Making the player feel some sort of emotion towards the character, the narrative of the story, getting them invested into what's happening and is going to happen, giving the player a sense of excitement for what is going to happen next. The wonder of being able to change what your perspective is on something to keep it fresh and new while going through the story. A random example, but to use a somewhat recent game, have you guys ever played Final Fantasy 15? Came out a few years ago, right? Now, although in the grand scheme of things, I think the popular consensus of the game is, of course, that it was a letdown. And, it's a lot of like, oh, what could have been, right? But again, roll with me here. But what about the moments when you played the game and you felt the emotion of what the game is going to be, right? We're thinking about emotion here, right? And it made you feel excited. So do you remember, say, again, for an example, in Final Fantasy 15, when you first meet Core and it's night out, and it's also the first time you hear that awesome song, Veiled in Black, right? It's also the first time that you actually fight these human and robot enemies in the game. Moments like this in the game actually work really well, right? For the most part, fighting in the game in Final Fantasy 15, by far, it works the best versus these human kind of characters and versus the robot characters, right? The game feels like it was specifically designed for these kind of fights. So it's a great moment in the game because it's a part of the game that actually gets you excited because you feel like the game is, it's starting to come together with the music, with the story, with the gameplay, and it starts to change your perspective on what is possible in the game, what's about to come, and you start to become emotionally invested in the game, right? I could give you guys a lot of different examples of different RPGs, but again, roll with this comparison about the idea I'm trying to get here at, okay? So how am I comparing this to fighting games and why it's bad to simplify games, right? Well, how many times have you seen a fighting game and gotten excited about it? But here's the rule, right? You can't tell me when the game is brand new. That's the cheating answer, okay? Because when anything is brand new, of course, it's going to be a little exciting, right? Of course, there's a sense of excitement when something is new because you've never seen it before. So you're like, what's that, right? So that's a cheating answer, okay? A fighting game, unlike an RPG, has no beginning and it has no end. A fighting game's lifespan from a certain perspective is infinite, okay? An RPG, while playing it, it needs these moments that get you invested in the story, right? It's a ride. But it's a ride that is supposed to have a beginning and an end, at least for sake of argument in this video, let's say, right? So if a fighting game can only gets you excited because it's brand new, the fighting game isn't succeeding, right? Because anything can get you excited when it's brand new. That's a cheating answer. Since once again, a fighting game has no clear-cut beginning and end, it has to keep the audience invested in it, okay? So let's think about what moments when a player is in a fighting game starts to even feel excited about the game again, or something starts to change their perspective, right? It's often exactly that the game had more to it than they thought it did. When people start finding new tech, when there's new matchup strategies, maybe a new combo is found, whatever it might be. When you see someone do something, no matter how big or how small it is, but it's enough to change your perspective on the game, you get excited to play it. You get excited to play again, to try it out yourself. I know I'm pretty anal, okay? I know I'm pretty old, I'm pretty anal, right? But how many of you guys really get excited when you see every person do the same combo on Twitter and they post that it's the best combo ever? When it's nothing. It's like Jimmy found combo A, so now Timmy wants to show that he can also do Jimmy's combo, and then Billy sees it, so now Billy wants to do it. Everyone is the star quarterback of the game. Everyone feels like they've done the hardest thing. Does that really get you excited? Like, really? I mean, come on, dude, really? Are you really that selfish and can't look at a game objectively enough that if everyone is doing the same thing and if everything is so easy, it's so easy to get this little pinch, this little penny of clout? Does that really make you excited for the game? Does that change your perspective on the game and what it can be if everyone is doing the same thing? So when games are so pre-planned and predetermined, when the developers have made the game so simple and they've already played the game for you and decided how it should be played before you even were allowed to touch it, right? It's extremely, if at all possible, to change someone's perspective on a game then and to get them invested when that's how you're designing a game, right? How do you really keep someone emotionally invested in something if there's not anything new? If maybe it's potentially even possible, potentially not even possible to find anything new. How do you keep someone invested in that if your game is so oversimplified, so pre-planned to that extent? A fighting game is not a RPG. The game should not come out in this sense with there's a beginning, a start, and an end, right? It shouldn't come out that the roller coaster ride is already planned for the player, right? Again, it doesn't matter how small or how big it is, but a game needs to have enough depth that you can find no matter how small of a little sparkle. That little sparkle of something new, you'll look at it and be like, man, I didn't know that was possible. It's like, man, I got to reevaluate this game, right? Depth in a game helps that, right? When a game is not so pre-planned and predetermined, right? That's why I like making a lot of the videos I do, you know what I mean? Because I think it's cool when I can actually do something that changes people's perspectives on something, right? Now, I don't want to continue this topic for too long, but to relate it to just the past 3 videos to kind of keep it on topic comparatively, if we were talking about emotion in a fighting game and how it made us feel, so let's compare it to these last three videos, right? So what would the emotion be for a game that failed like Karnav's Revenge, right? What is the emotional aspect or the emotional narrative of a game and the community's impression on that game, right? It was basically that it was a dumbed down Street Fighter 2 clone with, balloon, right? So, okay, perhaps emotionally we might appreciate the novelty of Karnov doing a balloon for some memes, you know what I mean? That's kind of funny, right? But a game for the most part being shown off as just a bad Street Fighter 2 clone, that's not changing your emotional perspective on it, right? Excuse me. Now, had a character like, once again, Mizuguchi, been more apparent, who really shows off the game system potentially very well, right? Besides him doing some pretty awesome looking combos, you also would be learning about the game while seeing those combos, since he's like hitting different dizzy spots to optimize it, right? You would feel a little bit emotionally invested in it if you saw it at first, because you'd be like, why did that? It's the same combo, but why is it dizzying here, but this one didn't dizzy, right? Like, isn't this the Ryu clone? Like, what's going on? This is actually kind of interesting, right? And how is he doing this huge combo in the first place? This is ridiculous. This isn't even like a, tap, 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 Fatal Fury 2 jab infinite. This is some complicated shit. This is kind of cool and crazy, right? As again, if you look at the time frame of this game, combos like this were not common, right? But if emotionally the narrative of the game is just baked potato wheel kick, that's hard to be emotionally invested in the game, right? A game like Guilty Gear spoke perhaps emotionally to an anime nerd crowd, right? Without getting into this specific topic too much, since I've talked about the birth and the death of the anime game before already, which maybe I'll redo that video with this new mic, but certainly from a certain perspective, Guilty Gear at first was able to succeed because of this more nerdy crowd, right? It had a specific vibe, and that helped it survive. But again, to a casual player that perhaps doesn't actually appreciate these aesthetics at first glance for this vibe, this game emotionally was probably a hard sell, right? Because if you just showed someone doing jams, FDC dash infinite would jam whatever FDC cancel combo or a Johnny mistrap, if you aren't already emotionally invested in that vibe, is that going to emotionally change your perspective on the game, make you appreciate it, right? But again, when Soul became strong in the game, and at least strong in the competitive narrative, right? And when it was through a basic fundamental Street Fighter mindset or mind game, right? That to do in the first place, you needed to then use the aspects of Guilty Gear. So you're learning about Guilty Gear, right? That's easier to understand, to digest, to appreciate emotionally, right? Because let's not forget too, for better or worse, seeing someone do explosive damage is also exciting for the audience, right? A random DP that can change the match that drastically is potentially exciting. And Street Fighter 2 is easy to understand on a very, very casual level like that, right? Because even if you don't like Street Fighter 2, you guys got to remember, Street Fighter 2 is not just the most important fighting game ever. It's one of the most important video games ever. There's tons of people that probably don't even like fighting games, but they know what a DP is, right? Double penetration. No, that's not what I'm talking about. Get out of here, Jimmy. Anyway. People know what a DP is, right? They can appreciate it, and they can understand these fundamental values of what made fighting games popular in the first place, right? There's an emotion tied to seeing a Dragon Punch. You know what it is, right? Finally, to compare the emotion to a game like old school Street Fighter, again, since we're trying to tie all these videos together, right? Specifically, if we're using Super Turbo as an example, which I used, right? Of Sagat versus Balrog, since they are two characters there in the competitive nature of the game, narrative of the game. We see that two clashing ideologies of what fighting games were and where they were going at the time, right? Since they are both the good guy and the bad guy of the game, depending on your perspective, that's a clear-cut emotion when you see that. There's a dude saying like, God damn it, Clayton only likes Shotos. Clayton, I can't believe Clayton likes Dragon Punches. Dragon Punches are cheap, man. I hate Dragon Punches. That's why I like Balrog, and I'm just rushing you down, man. I'm so much better than you because I just rush stuff down, right? Whatever you're saying, right? There's a good guy and there's a bad guy there. It's causing an emotion, man. You get the clear sense of what you're in for if you decide to play this game. You get ready to ride the roller coaster of Super Turbo that has no beginning or end, because fighting games should never end. And that's a pretty clever ending right there, wasn't it? Anyway, hopefully you get what I was trying to compare this to. RPGs are a roller coaster ride that have a beginning and an end, and there's an emotional aspect to it. But fighting games are a roller coaster that have no end. And if the game is too simple, you just probably won't, maybe you're not even going to pay to ride the roller coaster, right? Do you get what I'm trying to say here? Fighting games don't have an end, right? You need to keep the games with enough depth, right? Keep the fundamental values of what made fighting games popular in the first place and build off it, right? Anyway, dudes, I do have a PayPal or Patreon if anyone wants to donate. I'd appreciate it. This was a long video. I hope you guys liked it, or if you even watched it, right? The end.